The truth. Some say it, others hide it, some distort it, avoid it, or accept it. And these last ones are the only ones that really get to know it, and at the same time, to curse the precise moment where they decided to know it. Because living in a world of lies and ignorance is an easier and happier way to live, or better, survive. This small text was written by me almost 10 years ago. This was maybe the first time in my life that I gave the concept of truth a second look and started thinking in what it really meant. Since then, the question of what is the truth hasn't stopped rounding around my head, and it started to brought more and more questions with it. Welcome everyone to Truth as Hell podcast. I'm JP Satan, and today we'll be talking about the concept of truth and why we find it so hard to tell it in a daily basis. First, let's talk about parrhesia, an ancient Greek word which could translate to free of speech or talk with frankness. But it goes far beyond that definition. To put it in a more complete way, the parrhesia is an act of loyalty to one's conscience and to one's speech, where the speaker, or parrhesiast, doesn't need to use rhetorical tools or speech technicism because its objective is not to persuade an audience of their point of view, but to materialize their exact and complete thoughts with your speech, not caring for what consequences that may bring. This should be the goal that we, as humanity, must aim to speak frankly, without filters, being convinced that any possible outcome that may come was because we took the right choice and told the truth, not for our own benefits, but for the greater good. The renowned psychologist Jordan Peterson, which we'll be taking as a reference author today, says this about the perspective we are raised by our parents if things were as bad and corrupted as we often think they are.
If you love someone, your children, let's say, you don't tell them that the best way to get through the world is to lie about everything all the time. You don't sit them down and say, look, this is a corrupt enterprise, and altogether, and you can't trust anyone because they're always lying about everything. And your job is to become the best liar you possibly can become, because that's the way to get to where you need to get to and to set the world straight. No one ever does that.
Okay, moving on, let's talk about Socrates, known by almost anyone in the world. Even after more than 2,000 years later, unlike many others during the history, he has been an influential reference until now, and will probably still be in 2,000 years from now on. Looking back at his life, he was sort of a good exponent of what a parrhesiast should be. He asked questions to the people in quite a small town like Athens back then, and people started growing new concerns that they hadn't because of his questions. So the aristocracy made up a plan to get rid of him and his friends. As we all know, he was imputed for corrupting the children of Athens, so they threatened them and asked them to leave the city. Nevertheless, Socrates had different plans. Let's listen to Jordan Peterson again as he tells us the end of the story.
All the local aristocracy got together and said, God, we're sick of this guy. Why don't we tell him we're going to put him on trial? And sort of hint that he should get the hell out of town. That was the game. Yeah. So that, they announced the trial, and everyone knew it was going to be a fixed outcome. But the idea was, well, we'll announce it 6 months ahead of time, and he can have a colloquy with his friends and get out of town, and then we'll be rid of him, and that'll be the end of that. Well, and Socrates knew that this was the game, and so did his friends. And they all got together and said, well, we got to get you out of town. And Socrates was thinking, yeah, that's probably a good idea, because I don't want to be dead. And then he went off and had a little consultation with his conscience, his daemon, he called it. I think you actually pronounce it demon, but it means conscience for our purposes. And he went and had a conference with it, a little, and he was thinking internally, consulting his conscience, and it said, don't run away. And he thought, well, really? What do you mean don't run away? Like, these people want to kill me. They're going to kill me. What do you mean don't run away? And his conscience said, don't run away. Don't run away. That's how it is. You're not to run away. And Socrates came back and told his friends, okay, I went and talked to my conscience, and he said, the one thing that makes me different from all other men is that when my conscience tells me not to do something, I stop. Like, it doesn't tell me what to do. It tells me what not to do, and then I don't do it, no matter what. That's what made me who I am.
Socrates gave us all an example of what might happen if we spoke the truth in a parriciastic way. And today, as said before, 2,000 years later, we have this bunch of Twitter aristocrats that go with this new flow of political correction, which aims to cut out of the public spectrum anything they dislike or find offensive, even though it might be true or not. But to conclude this podcast, and based in the speech that Justin Murphy says in the podcast Parisha and the Future of Honesty, the contemporary world is filled with tiny pyramids of information givers that speak their truth in their convenience. But people are growing tired of these kinds of speeches and are starting to value the ones that are genuine, transparent, and fearless. Because as hard as it gets, truth should always be spoken.